Are you sure?
Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never ask a bride why she's getting married. Don't wear a skirt on a windy day. Deodorant is not a shower. Don't sniff chili flakes. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
The last time Maqbool Bhat climbed into his older brother's lap, he noticed the iron manacles that bound his hands and feet. These are the ornaments of a man, the 10-year-old child was told. Less than 6 months later, in February 1984, Muhammad Maqbool Bhat was marched to the gallows inside Tihar jail. Thousands gathered at the family home in the village of Tregam to join the funeral. The body, though, was wrapped in white muslin, sprinkled with rose water, and for the first time in Indian history, buried inside the prison yard. 18 years old, he would often tell visiting journalists, engineer Abdul Rashid Sheikh was among the thousands of young people who had marched to Tregam after news of Bhatt's execution broke, hoping to join the funeral procession that never took place. From his own prison cell, where he awaits trial on terrorism financing charges, Rashid succeeded this week in securing a historic victory against former Chief Minister Omar Abdullah, as well as the Bharatiya Janata Party's frenemy Sajjad Lone. The new Member of Parliament's victory demonstrates that Kashmiri secessionism, cowed and leaderless since 2019, is far from spent. Like the life of his hero, who was once described by the scholar and journalist Ajit Bhattacharjee as a colourful double agent used by both India and Pakistan, the story of engineer Rashid is suffused with grey. Emerging from inside the Secessionist People's Conference in 2004 to fight elections in the face of a jihadist boycott, Rashid was suspected of being one of many politicians funded by New Delhi. The enterprise, spearheaded by the Intelligence Bureau, aimed to undermine the National Conference monopoly of power in the state and to sow division among separatists at the same time. As the government prepares to hold elections to Kashmir's Legislative Assembly once again, it will be carefully studying Rashid's victory to see if it offers a template to hold back the resurgent National Conference and the forces of Kashmiri ethnic nationalism. Early in the autumn of 1966, shots rang out in the woods near the North Kashmir town of Handwada. 8 weeks after they returned home from years in Pakistan, prepared to fight for Kashmir's freedom, Bhatt and his associate Mir Ahmad found themselves trapped in a police ambush. Even though the two men fought their way out of the ambush, shooting dead police officer Amar Chand, they were eventually hunted down in the hills and chose to surrender rather than die. In 1968, both men were sentenced to death. Like many young people of his generation, Bhatt had participated in the anti-feudal movement that brought Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah and the National Conference to power at the time of independence. The son of a tailor, though, was soon disillusioned. Following the breakdown of his relationship with Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, Sheikh Abdullah was jailed in 1958 on charges of treason. Then a student at St. Joseph's College in Baramulla, that's a part, by the way, of the same institution where Pakistani irregulars had raped and murdered nuns during the war of 1947-1948, but fled across the line of control to Rawalpindi. 2 years after their arrest, Bhatt and Mir succeeded in tunneling their way out of Srinagar jail and escaping across the line of control. To their surprise, though, the two men were locked up when they reached Pakistan. Field Intelligence Unit officer Major Nazir Gul later deposed at their trial that the escape had been staged by India's intelligence services and that they were, in fact, Indian spies. Evidence on this issue is hard to come by since the archive has never been declassified, but Bhatt seems to have supplied information on the Kashmiri nationalist movement to the Border Security Forces Intelligence Wing, the G branch, before he escaped to Pakistan. Freed by the courts in Pakistan, though, Bhatt founded the National Liberation Front, the vanguard of the Kashmiri secessionist movement at the time. Toward the end of 1969, he recruited Hashim Qureshi, who would go on to hijack an Indian Airlines airplane on the Srinagar-Jammu route in 1971, among the major milestones on the path to the Bangladesh Liberation War. Even though the hijackers were fated by Pakistan initially, scholar Hassan Abbas records that Pakistani intelligence became convinced that the Indian intelligence services had managed the hijacking. The NLF leadership again found itself in jail. Faced with the termination of Pakistani support after the Bangladesh War, Bhatt returned to Kashmir in the summer of 1976. His first operation was a bank robbery to raise cash, in which a teller was shot dead. Weeks later, he was arrested, tried, and again sentenced to death. This time, there was going to be no escape. Like his hero, engineer Rashid became involved in secessionist politics as a teenager. From 1978, he joined the People's Conference, founded that year by Abdul Ghani Lone, one of Bhatt's childhood friends, and to become one of Kashmir's most important secessionist politicians. Lone had successfully stood for election in 1967 as a Congress candidate, but then founded the People's Conference. Lone political scientist Sten Wildman writes, worked to forge a non-national conference, non-Congress political force in Kashmir. In 1987, these efforts would flower into the Muslim United Front, a party of the religious right wing. The rigging of elections that year, though, had alienated young Kashmiris like Rashid. Many drifted towards jihadist groups. Like many other politicians, Lone formed a loose coalition with terrorists of the Yasin Malik-led Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, an act not so much of conviction but of survival in an atmosphere marked by ferocious internecine violence. The two factions soon splintered, with the JKLF at one point kidnapping Lone's daughter, the eminent lawyer Shabnam Lone. Lone's cadre set up a separate organization called Al-Barq. Al-Barq would, ironically, eventually turn on Lone himself, who was then guarded by police, claiming that he had embezzled their money. Even though Rashid was arrested several times by the Jammu and Kashmir police on suspicion of aiding terrorists, evidence never emerged to support these allegations. Rashid successfully earned a Bachelor of Science degree from Kashmir University in 1988 and an engineering diploma 2 years later. He began working at a government-run institution, the Jammu and Kashmir Projects Construction Corporation. Though others of his generation died in their thousands fighting with jihadist groups, Rashid's deep veneration for Bhatt seems to have left him unconvinced about the virtues of becoming a martyr. Elected from the North Kashmir constituency of Langate in 2008 and then again in 2014, engineer Rashid repeatedly demonstrated a talent for the theatrical. The MLA hailed jihadist icon Burhan Wani, who was slain in 2016, as a martyr. He campaigned for the return of the body of Afzal Guru, who was hanged for his role in the attack on Parliament House, and served beef kebabs on the lawns of the legislators' hostel in Srinagar to protest the state's monarchy-era ban on beef. He campaigned against wrongful arrests and the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, often enraging the authorities in the process. To the stone-throwing young people who propelled Kashmir's anti-India movement from 2008 onwards, it seemed he was their spokesperson, even though he had decisively broken with the secessionists by fighting elections. For his part, Rashid would tell young people not to store thrones or pick up the gun, but pursue their political ambitions through political means. From 2002, you see, The People's Conference leader Lone had begun a secret dialogue brokered by the Research and Analysis Wing and Pakistan's spy agency, the Inter-Services Intelligence Directorate, which was aimed at bringing about a political settlement in Kashmir. To Lone's mind, it was necessary to somehow reintroduce secessionist politics into the electoral sphere. Later that year, though, Lone was assassinated by the Lashkar-e-Taiba, and panicked all parties' Hurriyat Conference leaders rapidly retreated from the dialogue process. The communally charged violence that broke out in 2008 after the state granted temporary land use rights to the Amarnath Shrine Board for pilgrims suggested they were right. Assembly elections held that year, though, saw a huge turnout. Rashid, who had decided to stand, won power as an independent with a landslide margin. Lamgate, unlike much of Kashmir, thus saw very little street violence during the Islamist mobilization of 2010. 2 years earlier, mobs had attacked a temple and set fire to Hindu homes. But now Rashid used his credibility with the youth to ensure violence did not get out of hand. According to government sources, powerful interlocutors, including now National Security Ajit Doval, were told by Rashid that his provocative speeches actually offered a necessary political tool to undermine violent mobilization. The politician was charged with having received payoffs through terrorism-linked businessman Zahoor Watali and thrown in jail. The sympathy his incarceration generated likely contributed to his landslide win in Lamgate. But that's not the whole story. Elections to Jammu and Kashmir's legislature are again around the corner, and the wheel of fortune is turning back for Rashid. To a section of the security establishment in New Delhi, political Islam seems a good tool to rein in the resurgent National Conference. Kashmir's hard-right Jamaat-e-Islami, Lone's ally in 1987, has already made public its willingness to rejoin electoral politics. Other groups are also ready to bite if New Delhi is willing. This strategy, though, comes with considerable risks. Rashid's victory will without doubt empower secessionists and give Kashmir's defeated Islamist movement a renewed sense of hope. Efforts to draw secessionists back into electoral politics haven't always gone according to plan. New Delhi helped create and prop up the People's Democratic Party and even entered into an alliance between it and the BJP. That was meant to bring peace, but it ended up undermining the mainstream parties and empowering the religious right wing. For Delhi, a fateful moment of decision is again arriving. The fragile gains made since 2019 could only too easily be lost if New Delhi ends up making the wrong call. I'm Praveen Swami, and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for listening to this episode of Security Code.